Chapter 15. Early Renaissance in 15th Century Italy. This is the early stages of the Renaissance. It is first called Rinascimento, which is Italian for rebirth, later by the French term Renaissance. Let's focus in on Florence in the 15th century. Florence is a manufacturing center, a center for trade and international banking. Bankers and merchants are controlling the government. The governing council is called the Signora. It is a republic style of government. Guilds are holding competitions among artists for the commissions. So let's talk about the baptistry competition. So in 1400, there was a competition for a second set of bronze doors for the baptistry of San Giovanni in Florence. Just as a reminder, in 1360, Andrea Pisano created the original bronze doors for the baptistry, focusing on John the Baptist. This was commissioned by the Guild of Wool Merchants. For this competition, the theme was Sacrifice of Isaac. They were given the Gothic quatrefoil shape. Remember, the Gothic is the pointy edges, and the quatrefoil shape is the four lobes or circles. There were 7 major artists who entered this competition. We're going to look at 2 of them because they continue to compete for the same prizes throughout their lives. So this is Filippo Brunelleschi's Submission. We have Abraham about to sacrifice his son Isaac. We have the angel coming in and grasping his arm. We have the nearby ram caught in the bushes that will ultimately be sacrificed instead. We have a shepherd and a donkey below. So we have some movement. We have more figures in this piece than the previous bronze doors. Now let's look at Lorenzo Ghiberti's. Again, it's the sacrifice of Isaac. It's the exact same moment. So we have Abraham about to sacrifice his son Isaac and the angel swooping in to stop him. We again have a nearby ram as well as some people and a donkey. This one seems to have a bit more detail and a little less just random things stuck in. There seems to be a little more flow and connection to this. The judges of the competition also thought so. They ended up awarding the doors to Lorenzo Ghiberti. It ends up taking him 20 years to finish the doors, and they're each cast in one piece. But instead of going and sulking, Filippo Brunelleschi decides to go with his friend Donatello to Rome to study ancient structures. He decides, instead of going back to his home and pouting that he didn't win the competition, he decides to study more and study a little bit different things, study architecture instead. In 1419, there's another competition, and this again ends up with Brunelleschi and Ghiberti being the top 2 in that competition. In this case, it's for the dome of the Florence Cathedral. Remember, this was planned a half-century earlier by Francesco Talenti. Guess who won this competition? Brunelleschi. The dome ends up being dedicated March 25th, 1436, and is built in 2 separate shells, as you can see here. This is a technique common in Persia. It's a way to lighten the weight of this dome. These shells are supported by 8 ribs on the exterior. Others are linked by horizontal ribs like the Pantheon. He creates temporary scaffolding that cantilevers out of the walls of the drum in order to create this, instead of using large wooden planks that span the dome. He designs new hoisting machines powered by oxen with a reversible hoist. This allows them to switch gears without having to unhook and switch the oxen, which makes it a much faster process. Here you can see what we're talking about. The cupola weighs 27,000 tons. One of the fascinating aspects of this dome is the herringbone pattern of bricks that is used to create this. There's a wonderful video on the creation of the dome of the Florence Cathedral that I've linked to in Canvas. The Guild of Silk Manufacturers and Goldsmiths hired Filippo Brunelleschi to design a hospital for abandoned children near the church of Santissima Annunziata. This is the Ospedale degli Innocenti, or Hospital of the Innocents. There's a covered walkway, or loggia, an arcade raised above the ground level. He's using several ancient Greco-Roman styles in this. We have columns, capitals, arches, entablatures, that classical Roman or round arch. The round terracotta reliefs that you see with the blue and the white depict children, because this is a hospital for children. Here's a detail. In 1419, Giovanni de' Bici de' Medici commissioned Brunelleschi to add a sacristy to the Romanesque church of San Lorenzo. So a sacristy is a small liturgical space for priests to prepare the Mass. It also functions as a funerary chapel, so it's a small chapel off to the side of the larger church. This is a square room with a niche with the altar on one wall. There is a dome on top, and it also uses a 2-to-1 ratio. Giovanni was so happy with Brunelleschi's ideas for the sacristy, he had him redesign the nave of the Church of San Lorenzo. However, the nave is not completed until 1469, 20 years after Brunelleschi died. Each bay of the nave is twice as wide as the side aisles. You might notice that there's little less decoration than we're used to, especially looking at the Gothic churches that had been so popular. We're simplifying. We're going towards the Cistercian ideas a bit more, and a bit more towards the Greco-Roman style. You see the Corinthian columns, the round arches. We're moving away from the Gothic to a more Greco-Roman style. Here is the design for the Church of San Lorenzo. Here are some key monuments in Renaissance Florence that we will be discussing. First off, let's talk about Or San Michele. It began in 1337 as a granary and shrine. The guilds of Florence oversaw the design of this building. Each of the main guilds took responsibility to fill one niche on the exterior with sculpture. However, this was taking a while, so the city in 1406 set a 10-year deadline to fill these niches. So let's talk about some of these sculptures that are in the niches on the exterior of the Church of Or San Michele. This is by Nanni de Banco. This is 4 crowned saints. This was commissioned by the Guild of Wood and Stone Carvers. This represents 4 Christian sculptors who were executed for refusing to carve a pagan statue ordered by the Roman Emperor Diocletian. Here we have Saint Mark by Donatello. This was commissioned by the Linen Weavers Guild. It is 8 feet high. You have massive hands, and you can see that one leg is in the contrapposto stance. Remember, the contrapposto or S-curve stance is when you're standing and you have weight on one leg, and the other leg, the knee pops out and your hips move to a diagonal. You can stand up and try this. There's a lot of emphasis and a lot of detail on the garment of St. Mark, again, because this was commissioned by the linen weavers. Here is Saint George, also by Donatello, at Or San Michele. Now, Donatello was Ghiberti's former assistant. This niche was controlled by the Guild of Armorers. So we have St. George, as in St. George and the Dragon, and he is dressed in armor. However, originally, he wore a metal helmet and held a metal sword. This was a way to show off the wares of the armorers. This is another piece by Donatello, the Feast of Herod. This is the Siena Cathedral. This was for a baptismal font for the baptistry of Siena. This is in gilt bronze. We have the executioner presenting the head of St. John the Baptist to Herod on the left-hand side. Salome is dancing, and spectators are in shock on the right-hand side. And we have some great linear perspective here. We see these series of arches at different depths, really creating this sense of depth and perspective. This is Equestrian Monument of Gattamelata, also by Donatello. He was the commander of the Venetian armies. This is Donatello's largest freestanding work in bronze. This was near St. Anthony in Padua. This is very much related to the equestrian statues we saw in the Greek and Roman times. Equestrian means guy on horse. This is Donatello's Mary Magdalene. It is life-size and is not made out of metal. It is made out of poplar wood. It has been painted and gilded gold. Now, this is not the Mary Magdalene that we're used to seeing, the young woman at the side of Christ. This is the last years of her life that she spent in the desert as a hermit in penitence. So we have the remnants of this garment that is falling off of her. She is gaunt, emaciated, and her hair was gilded gold originally to create a halo-like effect. This is really meant to evoke a sense of sadness and awe at Mary Magdalene. The Guild of Wool Merchants asked Ghiberti to create a second set of bronze doors for the baptistry of San Giovanni. He began these in 1425 and finished in 1452. These were for the east entry facing the cathedral, the area called Paradise. So these had the theme of the Gates of Paradise. You will notice that these have a different style than the other two previous sets of doors. Each door contains only 5 square panels. These are not in the Gothic quatrefoil design. These are filled with Old Testament scenes. It took 12 years to create the model for these panels, and then 15 more years to finish. These were created in the lost wax casting technique. So we're actually going to zoom in on the story of Jacob and Esau. But before that, and that's there in the bottom center of the image, but before that I wanted to zoom in on this guy's head. This is a self-portrait in one of the rondos being the circular portions. He was in his 60s at this time, and he did include himself amongst all of the illuminaries that he put on the side panels. Okay, so zooming in on the story of Jacob and Esau. So first of all, we have some continuous narration here because we have several scenes in one image. So on the left, we have the blind Isaac sending Esau off to hunt. On the right-hand side, we have Isaac conferring the blessing to the younger son Jacob instead of the elder Esau. And we have Esau going off to hunt in the far background. So we have the first scene, then the second scene of the blessing, and then Esau going off to hunt. The architecture included here with those round arches allows Ghiberti to create a great linear perspective in this piece. Between the arches and the tile of the floor, we have a great sense of depth and perspective as we see the figures in the background smaller than the figures in the front. So I warned you at the beginning that we had 3 sets of bronze doors. Again, these are all for the baptistry of San Giovanni. So we have the first by Andrea Pisano, the second and third by Lorenzo Ghiberti. The first and second are both in the Gothic quatrefoil design, the third being in a series of 10 squares. So the first is the life of John the Baptist, the second has the theme of the life of Christ, and the third has a theme of the Old Testament or the Gates of Paradise. Also, to add a little confusion, each of these doors had been moved from its original location. So the first set by Pisano was first on the east doors, then moved to the south. The second was also started off in the east, then moved to the north, and then we have the third that stayed on the east. So we have the 28 panels of the first and second, the 10 panels of the third.